Well, this segment is about how South African laws are failing to adequately protect school children from sexual abuse by teachers. Despite the presence of legal tools like the Children's Act and the Sexual Offences Act, enforcement is weak and background checks against registers like the Child Protection Register are often neglected. Now, as a result, individuals with histories of misconduct can remain employed in schools. Additionally, this disciplinary process for accused teachers is often slow, inconsistent, and also poorly handled. Now, this systemic failure leaves victims vulnerable and contribute to a culture of silence and impunity within schools in South Africa. Now, in the conversation today, I'm joined by Hendrick Makaneta. He's an education activist, Centurion, South Africa. Thank you so much for joining us, Hendrick, on the conversation.
Thank you very much indeed.
Now, Hendrick, correct me if I'm wrong, but last year, the Education Labour Relations Council confirmed 111 cases of sexual harassment and abuse of learners by teachers. That's 29 more than the previous year. But only 6 teachers were dismissed following 7 sexual assault allegations. Now, how can we reconcile, this stark disparity between the reported cases and also the actual dismissals?
Well, it should be very clear at this point that South Africa is losing the war against perpetrators of sexual violence against innocent children in the country. And of course, there are many reasons why some of the cases do not see the light of day. We have a problem in South Africa where some of the mothers of the victims tend to accept money in the form of bribes from perpetrators of this type of offense. And hence, as a result of accepting money, the victims do not go to court. Even though the case has been opened, you find that the victims are not there in court to come and testify against, the accused person. And it is for this reason that the Education Labour Relations Council, although it receives a lot of complaints, only few of these complaints are dealt with severely because of the cooperation from the victim as well as the parents.
Okay. Now, Interpol has also branded South Africa the rape capital of the world. How does this context of gender-based violence shape the prevalence of educator-perpetrated sexual abuse?
Well, the entire issue of gender-based violence, as you may know, has to do with power relations. In the case of learners and teachers, you can see that there is that power inequality. The teacher who is supposed to be the parent, is more powerful than the learner. And, even in cases where, statements are taken, you find that these teachers are able to rely on powerful advocates and lawyers and attorneys who can represent them very well in court. And sometimes you find that, the statement of the victim is challenged legally. And, they are able to win on technicalities. And for this reason that we're saying, these poor children who are raped should not be subjected to a series of processes where they have to time and again come and give a statement. A statement should be taken just once, so that the perpetrators can be, pursued by the National Prosecuting Authority instead of, poking holes into the various statements that are made by the victims. And generally, the country, in my view, is not winning the war against gender-based violence because, men seem to be doing as they wish. And of course, we've seen, even in terms of the stats, many cases that are brought before court, not all of them are able to be pursued successfully.
Okay. Now, Hendricks, now let's quickly speak on a particular story where in October 2024, there was an alleged rape of a 7-year-old girl known as Tre Tre at Birdview College, which ignited the hashtag Justice for Tre Tre movement, which has since amassed over 1 million signatures. What does this massive public outcry tell us about community confidence in existing child protection measures? Do they trust it, or do they want more to be done?
There is no doubt that members of communities, in particular the civil society movement, has no confidence in the justice system of the country, given the developments in the case of Kwekwe, the girl who was violated sexually in the Eastern Cape. And, it is for this reason that, people from all walks of life decided to stand in solidarity with this young girl. We too stand in solidarity with Kwekwe, and we wish that justice can prevail. And of course, at some point, justice must definitely prevail to make sure that a clear message can be sent to society that this type of crime does not pay. But of course, I don't want to cascade, or I don't want to deal with the judiciary per se. I think that the judiciary in its own relies on the prosecution.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at the case of Omotoso, Omotoso was recently found not guilty by the court because of the poor work that was done by the prosecuting unit.
All right, now, Hendricks, between 2023 and 2004, we know that at least 22 teachers were asked for, serious crimes, including sexual misconduct. Yet we see that fresh reports suggest a continual pipeline of offenders. Can you tell us what are the gaps in recruitment and oversight that enable these predators to enter or even remain in South African classrooms?
Well, quite honestly, the fact that in South Africa we've got an organization that deals with admission of teachers, and that is called the South African Council for Educators. Normally, teachers have to produce a police clearance certificate, and this certificate is produced only once in the lifetime of a teacher. And in most cases, you find that, once a teacher has produced a certificate, 10 years down the line, or even 5 years down the line, they are found wanting because they can easily commit a crime now that they are already in the system. I think that what is required is an ongoing checks and balances to make sure that teachers don't just register once, but regularly they are assessed, and they should be requested to bring police clearance certificate with a view to ensuring that all the adults who are going to stand in front of our learners must be fit for purpose. They must be fit for working with children at all times.
Okay. Now, researchers, have actually warned that fragmented laws, like you talked about this one now, where, that certificate is only produced, once in a lifetime rather than continuously, for checks and balances. But researchers have actually warned that fragmented laws and poor coordination leaves loopholes in vetting and reporting. Now, how can legalization be harmonized in order to ensure seamless information sharing? And this is across education, social development, and also justice departments.
I think that we need a faceted approach in terms of dealing with this matter. There must be coordination. The Department of Social Development, along with the Justice and the Department of Education, including the South African Council of Educators, must work together to make sure that they've got a single system. Even teachers whose name appear in the National Register for sex offenders should be
Hello, Hendrick. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you definitely.
All right. Oh, we didn't really catch the last thing you said. I think you froze for a
was
bit.
saying that it's very important for a well-coordinated system to make sure that even the National Register for Sex Offenders should be made readily available so that schools can be able to know once a teacher makes an application so that they know that they are not going to accept a sex predator into their environment. So in some cases you find that if a teacher is found guilty in Gauteng province, for instance, the teacher can go and work in another province where they cannot be detected because we don't have these well-coordinated systems which talk to each other.
All right. Now, a recent analysis also cautions that what often follows is inaction and public outcry and, political promises. And people are saying that they're tired of all the promises, they're tired of all the talk, they want implementation and they want results. So how can we ensure that those promises translate into meaningful protections rather than just empty talk?
Well, we really need, first and foremost, we need to start moving from paper to reality. It's a good thing that on paper we've got good policies and the good laws which seek to protect our learners. But in practice, it's something else. We need a collaborative effort because in education on its own is a triangle which requires the collaboration between parents, learners, and teachers. And I think that we must add communities because these schools are found in communities, and even members of communities should be able to play a role in ensuring that we keep our schools safe at all times for the general well-being of our learners so that our learners can be able to create a better future for themselves, free from any form of harassment, be it from teachers or from learners themselves.
Hendrick, looking back, because we actually did talk about collaboration just a while ago. Now, looking back at the lack of coordination between key role players, in preventing and addressing these misconducts, that's these sexual misconducts, what single legislative amendment, if you had the opportunity, would you champion or even advise others to close the most dangerous gap?
I think that legislation should be amended in relation to sexual offenses involving especially our learners, because these are children who may not understand the law. At times, as I said earlier on, they are overpowered. These children are overpowered by these, lawyers and advocates who have studied the law, who understand the loopholes in the law. And so we need to really call on Parliament to find a way to ensure that, they make this process to be seamless for our children, so that when the children are in court, they can really feel that they are protected. But at the same time, they should not be subjected to, a lot of these, queries in terms of the statements that they make. They should make a statement just once, and that statement should be utilized in the court of law so that prosecution can be able to take place.
Okay, so but what about if the sex offender and child protection registers should be made public? Because so many people have actually said, that would or that might serve as deterrent, to others, and it might bring up transparency, in those registers, and it will be an effective deterrent. What do you think? Will that also be a solution?
Definitely, the National Register for Sex Offenders should be made available and should be made public so that every parent can be able to see for themselves whether they're teachers or whether they're anyone who's, tasked with protecting their children, whether they appear or not on that particular register. I think that even you will feel very much happy if you know that your child is going to an environment which is very safe, because no parent can be happy if they don't know the type of teachers that are going to teach their children. But at the same time, we must be able to have a history regularly in terms of the police clearances to check if our teachers have been prosecuted before, whether they've been, given any, whether they've been to jail before, or whether any case has been reported against them before. So that at all material times, we must be able to put the interest of our learners first. And of course, even the Children's Act itself, demands that whatever we do as adults, we must put at the center the interest of our children must come first at all material times.
Okay, so you're saying that you do not believe that the current SACE sanctions framework is actually adequate to deter predatory behavior?
Of course not, because remember, with the South African Council for Educators, student teachers go in with their applications, they complete an application form and submit their ID copies along with a police clearance. And once they've been processed at that level, they now move into the classroom to go and teach. But, life being life, things can happen along the way. If you find that somebody becomes a sex offender, for example, 5 years later, there are no other mechanisms to detect except when the victims report, to the police. If victims don't report, then we may not be able to know whether the teacher is a sex offender or not. So hence we are saying SACE as well must change its operation to ensure that teachers must come regularly. Perhaps like when it comes, if you look at the driver's license, a driver's license is renewed every 5 years. And I think that even teachers should be given that space to renew their SACE records every 5 years or every 3 years. And they must submit, in that process, they must submit their police clearance so that we can still see that, they are fit for the purpose.
All right, now, the Department of Education also confirms that girls and disabled learners are particularly vulnerable to this abuse. What do you have to say about that? What is being done about that? And how do socioeconomic inequalities increase this risk?
Definitely. I think that to a large extent, through campaigns, organizations in the private sector, along with the civil society organizations, as well as public benefit organizations, have been calling on government to do more to protect women and children. I mean, as we speak now, I still think that it is not safe for women and children to walk at this time of the night in the streets of Johannesburg without looking, at their back. And I think that we must really move to a point where everybody can be able to feel safe. Until such time that women and children can feel safe to even walk in the streets of any town, even at night. Until such point, then we will continue to call on government to improve, its performance in relation to protecting women and children in the country.
Okay, now thank you so much, Hendrick Makaneta, education activist, Centurion, South Africa, for your time, for your opinion, and also for your expert's view on this.
Thank you very much indeed.